In 2007, Facebook started business pages, which led to an incredible boom in the digital marketing industry, sparking agencies all over the country. So, how have digital marketing agencies failed small businesses? And what questions should you ask so you don't fall into that same category? Let's get into it. All right, well, welcome back to this week's episode of Theory of Why. My name is Rob Johnson. So on today's show, I want to give you 8 themes, 8 questions that you should ask when you are interviewing a digital marketing agency. And what sparked this topic was on the last show that I did, the last podcast series I did, it was called Waynecast. And I had a co-host, me and Chris. We went through, there was a couple of articles that were released that gained some pretty high popularity, and it was like a 2-part series. One was 25 questions to ask your agency when it comes to marketing, and the other one was 25 questions to ask your web developer. So we bounced those questions back and forth. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, man, what if we had a really quick guide that we could give people so that way when they're interviewing marketing companies, they could just go through this quick list, ask those questions, and it can really help vet that company better. Because for me, like one of the best things about working with an agency is working with an agency that's local. It's not required by any stretch of the imagination. We certainly have clients that aren't local, but it is nice to be able to walk into that agency, have a conversation, have a face-to-face. And like I have clients that are in South Carolina and in Louisville, and I still, at least once a year make an effort to go down there, see them, meet with them in person, because that person-to-person contact is still super important. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into these 8 themes / questions that you should ask your agency. That way you don't get trapped by them, because what I don't want to see happen is someone get roped into an agency, and I've seen this a lot, unfortunately, and they sign a 12-month deal, and they feel like they're locked into that deal, even though they're getting substandard work. So hopefully these things will help you not get caught in that. So number 1 is experience. So the question should be, tell me about your experience in the digital marketing field. And I want to delineate between experience and time, right? Because you can do something for a very long time and still be terrible at it, right? There are several examples in the marketplace of people who have been doing things a very long time and are still terrible at it. We talked about Bernie Madoff on a previous episode. He was a financial investor for a very long time and still, for some reason, couldn't get a handle on ethics and treating people well. So just because you've been doing it a long time doesn't necessarily mean you're great at it. So that's why I always question when people, we've been doing this for 26 years. It's like, well, you got 28 reviews on Google and your average is 1.5 stars. So something has gone terribly wrong. So experience matters. So talk about projects they've worked on, things that they really enjoy. What are some of their proudest accomplishments in terms of, their favorite pieces of work that they've produced? So look at some social media profiles, look at how they write copy. The experience side really does matter. And not only how long they've been doing it or the type of work that they've done, but just that being battle tested, being in the field, running ads. If your agency shoots video, look at how their videos work and how they take that video and correlate it to social media and make it work on those platforms. So experience is definitely the first thing that I would look at, is just tell me about your experience as a digital marketer. Number 2, competitors. So I would talk to them about them versus competition. So how do they consider their competition? And this is a bit of a weird question, because for a business owner to go into an agency and ask, so tell me about the competition that you have in the area, it throws them off a little bit. And I've been asked this question before, and I really enjoy it, because it gives me the opportunity to explain how I view competition in digital marketing, which is there is none. I don't really look at anyone that does the same thing I do as a competitor, largely because, 1, there's certainly enough business for everybody in the digital marketing space. And 2, just based on personalities and business structure, the odds that one company is going to be a perfect fit into 2 different agencies is very low. And I've seen this all the time. One of the last times I went to a pitch round where you have to go and bid and pitch against other agencies, they had, I think, a series of 3 rounds, and we made it to round 3. It was us and another company, and they asked us, to give our assessment of that company. And I just told them straight up, I was like, I have never worked with them. I have no idea about their quality or continuity of work. All I can tell you is what we do and how I look at your company and what we can do for you. That's it. I'm not going to sit here and throw stones at someone who I don't know. And I think that was the test was, are you going to slam a competitor or are you going to talk kindly about your competition? And it's because I just don't see people as competition. I'm not trying to beat anybody other than Wayne Media 1 week ago. Was Wayne Media better today than we were a week ago? Did we have more success this year than we did last year? And that's the only person I'm trying to beat is our company last year. Third question, freelancers. Do you work with freelancers? If so, how do those relationships work? Freelancers give you the ability to capture in the marketplace people that do exceptional work. Unfortunately, those people might not always be available. So that's why at our agency, we don't do any freelance work. Everything is in-house. That way we can control the process. Now, they might have a really good system for how they work with freelancers, but you just need to know how that process works. Are there going to be any service interruptions, timeline delays? Those are all things that you want to know. Number 4, KPIs. So key performance indicators. How do you measure results for my business? And if any agency is worth their salt, they're going to ask you, what would a meaningful target look like for you and your business? What do you want out of this relationship? Because for me, as a consultant, I can go into a business and say, hey, here's what your goals should be from my limited perspective. But you as the business owner have a much more insightful depth into what you ought to be doing as a company, and you can inform that discussion much better than I can. So you shouldn't lean on your marketing company to set your goals for you. They can certainly collaborate, help you, but you ultimately need to know what you want out of this. Is it more leads? Is it more awareness? Is it higher web traffic? Is it content for the sales team? What are the goals that we're trying to accomplish here, and how can we measure those to make sure that we're hitting all the right marks? KPIs matter, so ask the marketing company how they measure KPIs. Process. One of my absolute favorite questions. I'm 100% a process guy. Organizational development is one of my all-time favorite things to study and research. And I want to know, if I am a business owner going to an agency, how does your process work? What systems do you use? How do you ensure that things don't get missed? How are the communication protocols handled? If you're doing social media scheduling, how do I view my social media content? And for me, that was critical because I wanted applications that made the content review process as seamless as possible. I didn't want to send over a Google Doc with a bunch of images and copy, and then they had to review it and see what it looked like. To me, that's a very beginner level way to do social media. So from the beginning, I've always wanted a review process with a formal application that they could go in, make comments, approve, deny. It just looks a lot cleaner and it feels more premium. So what does that process look like for them as a digital marketing company? That's an excellent question to ask. Billing. Now, I bill clients very different than most other agencies. And it's because in the very first year that I did agency work, I would do all of the work. So let's say I signed a client April 1st, right? We'd work for them April 1st. I'd send them an invoice on April 30th marked net 30, and I might get paid by May 30th. So now 60 days have passed since I've started doing work and I haven't been paid yet. And to me, that was a very backwards way of running a company. And people do this still with net 45s and net 60s, and I understand that process. But as an agency, because we're putting in so much time and work up front into these accounts, we always bill at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of the job. That way we know that there's going to be no problems on the payment side as we're going through and executing our work. So how does their billing process work? That's something that you need to know. Both sides need to agree to it. And I've had clients push back. For websites, we charge a 50% deposit for websites, which is high. Most people charge 25 to 30% for website deposits. But again, if I am doing a 25% deposit and I'm not getting the 75% until I finish, what happens if that client walks? To me, and you know what, as I'm thinking about this, we don't charge 50%. We charge 70%. I don't know why I said 50, but the number is actually 70. We charge 70% deposits because by the time we get to the end of a project, if we finish the project and they walk, we want to at least be cash flow neutral on that job. We want to be at least at the break-even mark. So the 70% deposit is there. And that also helps motivate the client to keep communicating with us because they also are invested into the project as well. So it's very uncommon for a website company to require a 70% deposit, but we've built over 300 websites at this point. That's been our policy since about 6 months in is when I changed that. We've never had a problem since. And it's how you explain that to your client. So how does their billing process work? That's a really good question to ask. So logically, after billing should be cost. So how does cost work for your agency? Ask them, how am I billed? Is it a retainer? Is it a project? If it's a retainer, what things are outside of the retainer that would require an additional line item fee? And it's important to know that because for both sides of the table, because you might get into a digital marketing contract where someone's running your social media and then you call them up and say, hey, I need this flyer made real quick. And there is no such thing as a real quick flyer. It takes time, effort, design layout, review, back and forth with the client. There is no real quick process in social media. It's all, especially if it's at a professional level, it's all design work that's going to be labored over and then reviewed with the client. So it's at least minimum 2 hours to get this done if it's a simple project. So cost is really important because then you know what's outside of your agreement and what's inside of your agreement. And if it is outside, what's that additional hourly cost going to be, or how is that going to be calculated? So you need to understand how billing works, and you need to understand how cost works for that agency. So the next one is existence. So how long has your agency been in existence? And talk to me about how you've evolved through the years. And for us, that's always been a really fun story to tell. We've been around 5 years now. So in 2018, we only did social media and websites. Podcast studio wasn't available yet. We didn't do commercial videography. So as we evolved through the years, we started adding on more services as we became competent in them. So as we acquired a new service and we expanded into new services, hired more employees, we were able to offer more to organizations, and we can explain that story. And that's why I like to separate existence from experience. So how long have you been open versus tell me about your experience in digital marketing. Those are two very different questions, but both important to ask in the initial interview. So the next one is expectations. And this is the last one. So number 8, expectations. So as we look through this list here, you have, let me just recap this real quick. So number 1, you have experience. Number 2, competitors. Number 3, freelancers. Number 4, KPIs. Number 5, process. Number 6, billing and cost. Number 7, existence. And number 8, expectations. So expectations is probably the most critical component to talk about when you're signing a new digital agency. What expectations do you as the business owner have for them? And conversely, what expectations does the agency have for you? And can both sides meet those expectations? Because I've been in situations before, especially as a younger business owner, where someone has signed up for our services and their expectation was we were going to do everything. They wanted as little communication as possible, and they just assumed it was going to work for them with them not touching it at all. And that's just not how it works. That's not how good relationships happen. That's not how meaningful marketing takes place. So those expectations need to be really clear up front. And quite honestly, if you go through these 8 steps, if you go through these 8 different themes, you're really going to get to know whether or not this is a good client for you as a digital agency. And as the client, you're going to get to know whether or not that digital agency is right for you. So going through all 8 of those pieces is going to be extremely important for your business. So I have seen and been a part of deals that have broken up over some of these things not being discussed at the front of a deal. And that's why I put so much focus on the onboarding process and the sales process for our company, is because as much as I know companies are interviewing us through that process, I am also interviewing them as well, because I want to make sure that they're a good fit for my team and that we're going to have a good working relationship that is honest, transparent, and both sides are taking equal ownership in the work that we're doing. So please, if you're considering hiring an agency, or if you're starting an agency and any of these 8 points resonate with you, be sure to include them in the onboarding and sales process. Extremely critical in evaluating both sides of the deal to make sure that you're getting everything that you need for your agency or for your business. So the quote for today is from Bill Gates. He says, "Your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning." And this is one of the most uncomfortable things about starting a business, is when you piss a client off. When you make somebody upset, it's difficult because you know that you failed, but you also understand how not to do that again. How are we going to try to not repeat this process? And you can never say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that'll never happen again." Like, there's no way you can guarantee that. But what you can say is, we're going to do our absolute best to learn from this, to put things in place. So hopefully this doesn't occur, but there's going to be no guarantees. Because you can say, "I promise it'll never happen again." Then what happens when you do it again? Then you look extremely foolish because you made a promise you know you couldn't keep. So when you look at unhappy clients in the marketplace for your company, that is where you can learn your shortcomings as a business owner, where your shortcomings are as a team, and build those resources up to the point where those things happen less and less as the company gets bigger and bigger. But not paying attention to unhappy customers is one of the biggest failures that you can have as an organization. I see this with Google reviews all the time. People will get a Google review and it's negative, and they're like, "Well, that's not exactly how it happened. You know, she's embellishing details, or she's doing this or that." And it's like, well, she probably spent money trusting that your business was going to do something this way. It didn't happen. And that's her perspective. And at no point did you take any time to try and learn her perspective or ask questions. Instead, you just made a very quick judgment, wrote a very nasty reply to that Google review, and then acted like she was the one who was in the wrong. Now, you're gonna get reviews, like we see it all the time with our clients, where people will get a review from someone and they're like, "I have no idea who that is. They must have meant that for another company. We've never done work with them." Those things happen all the time. But this is mainly when you get feedback from companies who have been invested in your company. They have spent money with you, and something still went wrong. Those are the people that you want to listen to so you can make those processes better. That's happened for me. I told the story on Wayncast before about how we lost like a $6,000 job over the course of a weekend because I just hired the wrong person to do that job. And that was my fault. And through that process, I learned how to vet talent better. I learned how to make sure clients' expectations were met. And I just learned how to be a better business owner out of that process, because I listened to that feedback and it hurt. It sucked so bad to have those calls, because there's nothing worse when you know you're 100% in the wrong and someone's letting you have it, because all you can say is, "You're right. You're 100% right. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done it this way." And through that pain and through, taking that barrage of, verbal abuse, you'll learn quite a bit about how to be a better leader, a better business owner. But if you're the type of person that listens to that criticism and it's correct, and you still choose to go a different way, you're not going to be a business owner for very long. You're going to be out of business relatively quickly, because you don't have the ability to take in that constructive feedback, pivot, change, move on, and do something better with the organization. So you have to be willing to accept that feedback, even when it hurts to do so. That's what makes your company better. And also that's what makes the employee's livelihood better in the company, because you're taking that feedback and you're fixing processes. That way they don't step on those same landmines that would trip them up and get them in the same hot water with another client down the road. So lastly, before we wrap up today, I want to talk about Proverbs 13:12. It says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life." And what this means is that the longer that someone goes in their life without seeing a particular hope realized or something fulfilled, or they have something that they've always wanted to do, but they just decide not to do it, the more likely they're going to be discouraged about that particular thing, because it's where regret comes from, right? You say, "Oh, I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to, start this venture or do this thing, and it's my passion, and I love it, and I know I'd be great at it." And you just keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. That's where that discouragement, that resentment, that anger, it just builds over time. And that's what happens when you see people who are in their 50s and 60s and they're incredibly unhappy. Odds are that they had a hope, they had something that they wanted to do, and they just couldn't, they couldn't take that risk to jump out of the boat and see if that thing would have worked for them. And that can be a hard thing to do. So I like this proverb because it reminds me, at least, that risk is a necessary part of life. And if you have a hope that is constantly being deferred, it's going to make you feel very, just disinterested inside. You're going to get to a point where you just don't care about the things that you used to care about. So when you see that hope or that dream and you see that come to pass and you see it as something that has now been fulfilled, it feels very uplifting. You feel like you're accomplished because you have set out to do something and you've executed it. And that is exactly how I felt about starting Wayne Media. It was nerve-wracking. My wife and I talked a lot about, am I going to leave my corporate job and go do this? It's extremely risky. We have 2 small kids. And I'm like, you know what? It's the time to do it. If there's no time like right now to do it. So let's just, put our faith in God and jump, and we're going to do it. And the fact that, almost 5 years later after making that decision, things have grown, and it has not been without pain and problems and all of those things that go along with owning a business. But you have, at least I have, a much better outlook on life because I was able to jump into that thing that I really wanted to do and take that risk and work extremely hard at making that happen. So if you have something that you want to do and it is the right time, you've thought it over, you've prayed through it, do it. Execute it. You can't sit your whole entire life in fear, wondering what would have happened or could have happened if I'd done that. Now, it all has to be measured, right? You have to think about all of the dynamics of it. You have to think about the family element, if that is in your life. You have to think about logistics and the realistic nature of it. But if those things have been thought through, you don't want to sit back in 30 years and be like, man, I really wish I would have done this. Even as simple as like taking a trip somewhere or having a life experience or just doing something fun. You never want to regret something that could have been done. So love that proverb. It's only, probably like 15 words, but boy, does it make me think a lot every time I read it. So that is it for today. So hopefully that's helpful for you if you're a business owner or even an agency and you're trying to figure out how to vet a client or an agency and you're looking at both sides of the deal. Hopefully those things are helpful for you. Apart from that, we'll catch you next week. I appreciate all of you watching. Take care.